The Tucker Carlson stuff has just been absolutely joyous. I remember watching my first serious Tucker Carlson, like, I guess you could say content interaction. Not like some quick segment I just saw on TV, but something I really sat down and consumed was Tucker Carlson Fox documentaries on the Fox network. And he did a documentary about January 6th that was just so bad, just so god-awful. It was just layers and on top of layers of speculation, of hearsay, of nothing that was like cohesive. It was, well, this could be a spy, or it could just be somebody who just came to January 6th. Hey, we got this expert in spying, and we asked him, could this be spying? And he said, maybe, I don't know. And then it'd be dun dun dun. Now that we've proven that January 6th is a false flag hoax spy operation, it was bizarre. He would go out on a limb, speculate on that limb, and then use that limb to jump onto a new point. Now that we've established this thing, we've 100% not established. And so I didn't watch many of the documentaries. The Jan 6 one was bad. The Viktor Orban was bad. It was just him basically praising this almighty leader, how fantastic and wonderful he is, while not questioning any of the stuff that his critics have said about Viktor Orban. He'll say, oh, what, are you too mean to the liberals? No, he's leading the EU country with the most public sector corruption in Europe. And from somebody who talks a lot about, you know, fighting the establishment and fighting against the swamp and this and that, et cetera, if you have a European leader that is leading the country with the most public sector corruption in Europe, I don't know if that's somebody you should be telling the right wing in America to emulate. Somebody who has centralized control of the press around himself. Again, seeing so much complaint about the Twitter files. But then you run over to Viktor Orban's government, who's doing stuff. I mean, it isn't even in the same realm of, oh, the government has recommended you take down these pictures, and then Twitter doesn't take down the majority of them, takes down a few of them, including revenge pornography. And then you go over to Viktor Orban's Hungary and the centralization of the press, and all that can be like, look, put that all to the side, everything will be fine, bring him into the fold. I was not a fan of Viktor Orban, of Tucker's commentary, not a fan of his documentaries. And his recent independent stuff, now that he's separate from Fox, after Fox lost that $850 million settlement, has just gone off the deep end. Now that he's got nobody acting as the guardrails, no executives at Fox telling him to slow down, he's interviewed people who has claimed to smoke crack and have gay intercourse with former President Barack Obama. He's interviewed Cat Turd as a high-profile guest. He's been doing something special. And so I saw some recent segments from him on his show, and I want to show you just how far off the deep end Tucker is getting as he talks about UFOs. Now, look, I think the idea of little green men coming to Earth and visiting us to be quite silly. I don't believe it. I don't believe we've ever been visited by aliens. Now, that's not to say that I don't believe that it's impossible that there's life on other planets. If anything, I find that I would believe, if I was to guess that we ever find life on other planets, it's going to be a lot more boring than people imagine in the movies. It's going to be like, wow, look at this microbe that lives on this asteroid. Doesn't really do much. It's a microbe. I guess it's just microbing around. Like, that's what I expect it to be way before we find anything that's even resembling like a rat or a bird, let alone beings that can have complex thoughts and feelings and contemplate their own mortality like human beings can. But Tucker Carlson went a totally different angle on the UFO stuff than the little green men, and so I wanted to show it to you guys because his theory I think has some weight. And so before you all discredit it like a bunch of spoiled, rotten demorats, who's not even going to listen to a good man's argument. Just take in what he thinks all these UFO sightings are, since UFOs are all the rage these days due to a few reports and videos being released to the public.
The U.S. government has physical evidence of crashed non-human-made aircraft, as well as the bodies of the pilots who flew those aircraft. An alien species is flying hypersonic aircraft over our cities.
So they're from here, and they've been here for thousands of years, whatever they are. And it's pretty clear to me that they're spiritual entities, whatever that means. They're supernatural. And there's no evidence, has never been any evidence that there are lots of these objects, these vehicles coming into our atmosphere from somewhere else, some other planet. There's no evidence of that at all.
The Pentagon has spent decades studying these otherworldly remains in order to build more technologically advanced weapons systems.
They don't behave according to the laws of science.
In other words, UFOs are actually real, and apparently so is extraterrestrial life. Now we know.
So these are spiritual phenomena. There's no evidence they're from another planet. I mean, I think that's the that's the lie, that they're from Mars. Look, space, the atmosphere is really well monitored. It's a binary. They're either, you're on team good or team bad. You can assign any name to it you want, but like, what are these things? Are they good or bad? And I think some of them are bad. And if the U.S. government knows that, or elements, the people within the U.S. government know that, then they're serving a bad force.
In a normal country, this news would qualify as a bombshell, the story of the millennium. But in our country, it doesn't.
Being a liar makes you a bad person. When you lie, you are serving evil. There's a moral quality to it that's inescapable and very obvious.
I like that. I like the person who clipped this, Richard, he including that little clip at the end. So there's a few things I got to throw out there. So the first thing I got to throw out there is that there have been claims that non-human biological material by former government employees have been found in craft that have been crashed and found by the United States government, etc. Now, people immediately hear that and they assume aliens. I mean, that could be a dog, that could be a cat, that could be a rat, that could be a fox, that could be green eggs and ham. It could be all sorts of stuff. We don't know. We also don't know how honest somebody's being. Sometimes people will point towards like a former government official signing an affidavit saying aliens are real, and they're like, oh my God. And the thing is, an affidavit does carry legal weight, but an affidavit is not, here is a photograph, here is video, here is X, Y, and Z. It is a claim by a former government official. And a lot of these times when you dig into these former government officials who are now going around selling books, selling t-shirts, going around telling everybody these tall tales, is you'll find out that they had clearance to not even know the things that they're saying, or that they didn't have any clearance at all, or they were actually not the top researcher of the alien division of the United States Scientific Service or whatever the hell in the secret underground Men in Black laboratory, but they were the janitor at the Fed. So I'm not going to go out there and say that I know that all these stories that are being regurgitated now about little green men are fake. I'm not going to say that. What I am going to say is that there's a pattern of behavior with so little information that we have now that could be repeating right now, and we are far, 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 far from proving extraterrestrial life. We have not proved extraterrestrial life. Again, non-human biological material could refer to any number of things that is non-human and presently still on Earth, right? So the first thing is, have we proven aliens are real and we've proven extraterrestrial life through the testimony of these former government officials? No, we haven't. We haven't. Not only would their testimony not be enough, they haven't been unable to provide the evidence that would prove that aliens have come to Earth, etc. We have not done that. And that hasn't even been outwardly stated by the people giving said testimony. So that's the first thing. Second thing, and this is the second arc, because usually it would end here, but he goes further to, and this is how I view it, imply that these UFO, unidentified flying objects, now just because something's called a UFO doesn't mean they're aliens, by the way. It just means it's an unidentified flying object. That could be spycraft, that could be anything that the government cannot identify. And I've always believed that a lot of these UFOs, outside of, people just going crazy or people thinking they saw something because they saw a movie, and a lot of times with these alien sightings, what'll happen is there's like a string of alien movies, and then around that time there'll be a big spike in aliens being identified as being seen by people that have suspiciously similar traits to the alien movies that came out that summer. And so there seems to be some correlation here. But he seems to be in a totally different area. He seems to be of the assumption that, no, these are not aliens from another life. That's the op. So he's he's decoding on a level that I could never even dream of. See, Tucker Carlson, usually the theory is, oh, the government's hiding aliens from us. No, 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 no. You guys are betas if you think that. You guys are pathetic betas if you think that's the case. It's actually multi-layered. The aliens, which people think the government is trying to hide from us, is actually the op. That's the cover-up for the bigger secret, which is the spiritual demons, angels, whatever you think he was implying. I'm leaning towards angels and demons, since he said some was good, some was bad. That's what I'm leaning towards, that are on this earth, that are being identified as UFOs, unidentified flying objects. So, okay, first thing is, that's crazy. Second thing is, that's crazy. Third thing is, that's crazy. There's no evidence substantiating this. He's just throwing out there that this huge the spike in UFO attention, and some of these videos coming out that shows like a dot on screen moving. And I know like some of these videos that have come out, it shows a dot on screen moving and people say no aircraft could ever move that fast. But then you'll go and you'll investigate further and you'll find out actually it was the thing that was scanning it that was moving fast, which gave the illusion of the thing on screen moving much faster than it actually was, due to the speed of the craft that was recording the UFO. You can always dig deeper and find these types of explanations, or even if you don't find explanations, that will be the area people will hide in this. They see we don't have an answer for this, that's where the aliens lie. It reminds me a lot of how people used to talk about the missing link in evolution. Oh, we don't know the evolutionary trait between this and the Neanderthal. See right there, that's a flaw in evolution. Then you'd find it and it'd be like, well, what's the link between that and the Neanderthal? And then it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. You're hiding in the margins of the lack of human knowledge. And that's what the UFOs and the aliens are doing well as well. But he's on the angel and spirit side of this. What am I even supposed to say to that? That they were angels and that they were spirits? We don't. They're angels, they're spirits, they're goblins. Honestly, if this is the level of our political commentary, I have some advice. We need to just start all the political commentators, all the alternative media political commentators. If this is how we're going to get attention to beat mainstream media, as I'm hearing, oh, mainstream media is so, like, this so untruthful. It's so full of lies. They don't talk about the real issues. That's why NPR is failing. That's why ABC is failing, all this stuff. And then I go to alternative media, to the stuff that's supposed to be succeeded, and this is the stuff that's getting highlighted. A lot of the success of alternative media, and I'm saying this as a member of alternative media, I'm not saying this with any anger, a lot of it is just we're a lot more free to go pursue complete and utter bullshit that can grab headlines and grab clicks. And that's an example of what this is. This is complete and utter bullshit that he's chasing. So I have some alternative proposals. Instead of it being aliens or angels, let's go a little further. I think Vosh should claim to have spotted a Centaur. I think Destiny should claim to have spotted a fairy. I actually, while walking to work today, saw goblins. I saw the Kiev sewer goblins in the sewers. He poked out a little manhole, he looked around, looked at me, made and they went right back down. I think Che Guger should spot a few bridge trolls. If this is the area we're in we're rejecting mainstream media due to them not being accurate enough or not covering the real issues, and now we're in the lands of Narnia chasing ghosts and shit, then we might as well just have fun with it. I'd much rather spot a goblin than an angel. I'd like to see a creature that doesn't remind me of my own mortality, wouldn't you guys? We need to get cryptids, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot. Now, what I want to show to you guys, though, because we're talking about evolution for a second, and like the missing link, is that when you see stuff like this, it might make you think that Tucker Carlson isn't a man of science, that he would just start jumping to the idea that these are angels, that, oh, they're not aliens, not UFOs. Angels. We have angels on earth, these spiritual beings that have always been here, some good, some bad, off of a few pieces of blurry photographs and video. That would lead some people to believe that Tucker Carlson isn't a man of science. But I want to reject that, because Tucker Carlson here has an over 2-minute conversation with Joe Rogan on the issue of science, specifically the issue of evolution. See, Tucker Carlson likes evidence, and he just does not think that there is enough evidence to substantiate what he calls the theory of evolution. compared to his much better theories, much more scientifically proven. And so I wanted to show this segment, this back and forth with Joe Rogan, which is the same podcast where he was claiming fairy dust and goblins and centaurs and dragons and whatnot.
Cares about you, you're important to the people
but
around you.
If we don't think people are important, then what do we think is important? I guess that's what I'm saying.
Not necessarily that we don't think people are important, but if evolution is real, and if there is this constant, I don't know, but it's visible. Like you can measure it in certain animals.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin is like kind of not true. Right?
And what
We've given up on evolution. Did they do that? Was there like a moment where it's like Pluto's not a planet anymore? All the scientists came together and they said, the theory of evolution, gunk, nonsense, completely preposterous. Can't believe we ever believed that Darwin crankhead. Oh my God, he was so high when he came up with it. Nonsense. I don't remember that happening. I don't remember everybody giving up on the theory of evolution. I think what he means is he's given up on the theory of evolution, not that the rest of the scientific world has given up on the theory of evolution. By the way, what a claim just going out there that there's no evidence for evolution. None of the fossil record, none of the signs that we see in our real day-to-day life of evolution happening over time. The evidence of evolutionary dead ends like the Neanderthal. Just, man. It's crazy. We need to update the school system because in elementary school, middle school, and high school, they still teach it. So Tucker Carlson needs to race over there before we corrupt another generation of kids with this silly idea with no evidence that we taught for no reason. Because there was no evidence. There'd be no reason to teach it if we weren't able to find any evidence for the theory. The scientific theory, mind you. And we're going to get into that in a second.
In what sense?
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not. And
there's not a fossil record of transitionary species, like species that are adapting to its environment.
There's
and they
tons
develop...
of record of adaptation, and you see it in your own life.
When I hear this, by the way, when I hear somebody describe this, what they don't realize is what they're describing is evolution in the short term. When you're talking about, we're seeing these different species and animals adapt and evolve over short periods of time, because there are animals that have such short lifespans that you can legitimately see the process of evolution play out on a small scale through multiple generations. And he's saying that, yes, that exists. But the idea of that happening over longer periods of time, that's silly. There's no evidence, no fossil record. There's immense fossil record. The whole reason we know about Neanderthals and the different, with the ancestors of the human race and of the human species is because we followed the fossil record. We looked to who our evolutionary ancestors were, and we followed the record. You just, if what he's saying is true, we should not know what a Neanderthal is. If what he's saying is true, we shouldn't be able to track the evolutionary biology of so many different animals and species. Why would it be true that animals can adapt, and he's acknowledging that animals and their species adapt over time, but that only happens over the short term? Wouldn't it be a bunch of short-term adaptations that stack on top of each other that become long-term evolutionary changes of a species adapting to its environment to increase its survivability?
I have a lot of dogs. I see adaptation in dogs, through the
through
litter to litter. But no, there's no evidence at all zero, that.
I like how much he doubles down on it. Instead of giving a supporting point, he just claims that there's no fossil record. There is. There's no evidence. There is. The idea that all of school just accepted evolution and just started teaching it for no reason. They just said, we came from monkeys. Why? I don't know. Ooh, just it was for fun. It was for shits and giggles. There was no fossil record. You can go and you can physically see the fossil record, by the way. There's museums where you can go and physically see the fossil record of the evolutionary ancestors of multiple species, human beings included.
People, evolve seamlessly from a single cell amoeba. No, there's not. There's no chain in the fossil record of that at all.
So what he's talking about right now is the thing we discussed earlier, hiding within the unknowns. So what used to be described as the missing link between human beings and, you know, our evolutionary ancestors, the monkeys, the apes as they referred to, but that's not what they actually were. They weren't literally monkey ape, but it was a subspecies. You get the idea. Not what we consider today monkeys and apes. That evolved from something else. What he's talking about here is basically the missing link rebuke of evolution, which was, okay, you say we evolved from this to this, but what came in between? And that used to be referred to as the missing link. And when scientists eventually found that missing link, which was the, you know, the ire of the evolutionary opponents, what happened is they simply just found a new missing link. If you found a missing link, well then what's the thing between that new missing link and Neanderthal? And then you find that and it's like, okay, what's the new thing between that new thing and a Neanderthal? And you just keep going and keep going and keep going. What he's requesting here is a total line from a single cell organism all the way to current day human species. We don't have that. We don't have that because, you know, objects don't last forever. Fossils break down. We haven't found all the evidence, but we continue to fill out the missing links. So the idea that there's no evidence when there's substantial evidence, and what he's really saying is we don't have a complete fossil record from a single cell all the way to modern day, which is a high demand, by the way. And when would that be satisfied? Even if we could find things like near that single cell time all the way to today, we're never going to have a complete record of every single evolutionary change. Because like he's saying, I mean, if we're seeing evolutionary changes in our own lifetimes with other animals and other species, and we can see that in a controlled environment, especially with insects, for example. If we can do that, how can you expect us to do that for tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution? I mean, you could do broad strokes and attempt to do broad strokes of whatever you can recover from the fossil record, but you're never going to be able to achieve this complete evolutionary line. And I think that's the purpose of the standard of evidence.
And that's why you don't actually hear people, you hear them make reference to evolution because the theory of adaptation is clearly, obviously true. But Darwin's theory's totally, that's why it's still a theory almost 200 years later. You know?
I love how it feels like he just misproofed himself in like a 10-second time period. Can we listen to that again? Listen to the last 10 seconds. See if you catch what I'm catching.
But Darwin's theory of adaptation, they make reference to evolution because the theory of adaptation is clearly, obviously true. But Darwin's theory's totally, that's why it's still a theory almost.
How do you say in one sentence, the theory of adaptation is obviously true? Okay, the idea that species change over time, duh, we see that in our own time, so it's obviously true, that theory. But Darwin's theory of evolution, hogwash, that's why it's only a theory. How can one thing be a theory and be obviously true, but the other thing be a theory and then it not be that substantial, not that important because it's a theory, and that's why it's only a theory? And I think the reason he's running into this wall right here is because there's a difference between a theory in, you know, common parlance where, oh, a theory is that he murdered the butler, or a theory is that she also murdered the butler for this incentive. And like a theory could have a little evidence, it could have a lot of, it could be all sorts of stuff. A scientific theory has to meet a bar of evidence that is already quite high. And so for him to even call it a theory undercuts this thing he was saying earlier that there's no evidence. There has to be evidence for it to even be considered a scientific theory to begin with. But also that standard of evidence is quite high.
200 years later, you know, no, we have not found that at all. And I can't even guess. I mean, I have my own theories on it, but they're not proven.
What are your theories?
God created people, you know, distinctly.
I love the difference in treatment between the two, let's just call it the two theories, even though I think we're giving like the theory of God a little bit more weight here, because, and I'm not trying to like be mean towards believers, but there is no scientific test for God. There's no, God, give me wings. Oh, I don't have wings. Guess God isn't. There's no, how would you even test for that? there is a fossil record for the idea of evolution. There is evidence for that. There's physical evidence. There's biological evidence. We can see the adaptations. We can see the fossil record. We can see these things. We can feel these things. We can study these things. You can't just, like, you can study religion as a concept. You can study religious theories, like, about the origin of man, but they don't have the same evidence, scientific evidence, that evolution does. And so for Tucker, when he's talking about the scientific theory of evolution, he needs a record from a single cell all the way to human beings of today, or he's just going to disregard it. Unless it's a theory that he can't disregard because he'd be silly to disregard, so he's just going to call adaptation the good theory, this the bad theory, but it's only theory. He's going to disregard that, but the idea of God doing it, yeah, sure, I'll just believe it. Why? Because I want to believe it. I don't need any evidence for that. For the other thing, and complete fossil record, I need to know every single thing, or I can't believe it. God did it, that's enough for me. Come on.
And animals. I mean, I think that's like, I think what every person on Earth thought until the mid-19th century, actually.
Right, but
it's not a new idea.
They didn't have computers. They didn't have a general understanding that we have today of the process.
Do you think we understand more now?
Yes.
Really?
You don't think that we understand more today?
We understand way less. We understand so little that.
Dude, is he just trying to see what he can get away with? I'm wondering that about Tucker Carlson now. Is Tucker Carlson, you know, now that he's working in the alternative media space, is this all just a big joke to see what he can get away with saying? Now that he's unrestricted by Fox, like, what people will be like, fine, Tucker, okay, I'll entertain that theory. Like, come on, really? Right? You can't register if we know more today or 400, 500 years ago. We have the ability to make a bomb so powerful it contemplates the end of the world itself as we know it. We can harness the power of the sun and throw it at our enemies. We're making robots that can do labor. We're making AI algorithms that can solve problems. We have instantaneous communication from one continent to another continent. We are living in an information age. The idea that we know less, I mean, what big loss of information has happened? I mean, you could say, like, skills to make certain things have, like, faded over time, like certain weapon systems that are no longer popular, caboosement or something like that. But what is this great loss that makes it so we know less than before in the face of all that we've gained? We didn't lose some gigantic library that held like 1/3 of human knowledge or something in the last 300, 400 years.
We're actually sitting here allowing like a bunch of greedy, stupid, childless software engineers in Northern California to like flirt with the extinction of mankind.
He's a very smart man. I can't understand how this man right here could ever be found to be on the bad end of a question of journalistic integrity. How this man right here, when asked to back up his claims, could ever be unable to. I just find it impossible. Tucker Carlson, the biggest name in conservative science.